The NBA draft is here for the Indiana Pacers. They now have 2 picks. They made a trade. Why'd they do it? What does it signal? What's coming tonight? And what else do you need to watch about Myles Turner? It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today it's draft day for the Pacers. The draft already happened. The first round already happened. The Pacers did not have a pick in the first round thanks to a very fortuitous trade. They are now up twice in round 2 because they made a trade on Wednesday, one that I think is very smart, and I got lucky-ish / pay attention-ish, and wrote in a story that I projected it could happen, and it did. So we'll break down why the Pacers did it, what it signals is coming today, what to watch for tonight. I'll talk about some players, I guess, but I have to admit that I have done almost no scouting because the Pacers made the NBA Finals, which ended 4 days ago. And then we have to talk a little bit more about Myles Turner because I missed a big thing that I wanted to talk about yesterday with his free agency. But we start with the draft. The Pacers had about a week and a half ago picks 23 and 54. Now they have picks 38 and 54. The first trade they made that I did a 17-minute podcast on was with the Pelicans. They traded the 23rd pick this year, which went to New Orleans. Then New Orleans actually flipped it to Atlanta and became Newell from Georgia. The Pacers got their own pick in 2026 back, which is a slam dunk for them, especially given what happened since with Haliburton's injury. And then today, yesterday for you listening, the Pacers made a second trade. So they sent away a future second rounder, the Kings 2030 second rounder specifically, and cash to the Spurs. The Spurs sent the 38th pick to the Pacers. The second straight year, the Pacers and Spurs have made a trade involving second-round picks, and the Pacers get one in the 30s for the second year in a row. Good relationships help in this biz. So what are they up to? First of all, let me be clear about something. Not every little trade is a signal of some giant, bigger thing to come. And sometimes NBA teams just do little small things because they're good little things to do. And in this case, that's what this is. So if you read my story previewing the draft that I wrote about, I talked about how because of Tyrese Haliburton's injury, the Pacers' luxury tax thinking might have changed. I talked about that on this podcast yesterday. And I don't know how much they're willing to go over, if they're willing to go over, whatever. But having cheap players now has value. And that was part of the good reason to trade away the 23rd pick. But now, here's something different. So if you are picked in the second round, you can be signed with salary cap exceptions, including a new one in the 2023 CBA called the second round pick exception that allows you to sign a longer deal, 3 or more years with the team that picks you. But also, if you're picked in the second round, your minimum salary is lower than the veterans minimum by like almost $1 million. The rookie minimum, the 0 years of service minimum, is the lowest first year salary contract that the NBA has, which is important for the Pacers because now having pick 38, they can draft a player who is good enough to actually roster and give them that contract without having to feel like they're just handing someone money because they need to do it for salary reasons. What I mean by that is they entered the day with only the 54th pick. And if they wanted to pick a cheap contributor at 54, they can always just do that, right? Pick the guy they think is best, sign him to the cheapest minimum deal possible and call it a day. But in this specific circumstance, that doesn't make a lot of sense because every two-way contracts have been around since 2017. Every single 54th pick since 2017 has gotten a two-way in their first year, right? There is a line somewhere in the 40s where every pick there and after is usually getting a two-way outside of unique financial circumstances for a team like Trace Jackson Davis, for example, with the Warriors. But usually it's a two-way. 54 is usually a player of two-way contract quality. You don't want to give that player a more expensive contract than that just because of your financial situation. But 38th pick, 16 picks higher, you're getting someone with more potential, maybe more talent, even if you don't want them to contribute right away. you're more willing to invest in them and give them money. Examples, Johnny Furphy and Andrew Nembhard, right? The Pacers gave both of them 4-year deals at about $8.6 million in total value for each of them. Nembhard's deal last year, or I guess the ongoing season, whatever you want to say, is below the veterans minimum, right? He's cheaper. Nembhard's contract actually decreased, so his was a little different. The Pacers won't do that in this instance, but they have gotten the value of these cheap early second rounders before, and they've hit with the picks, which helps. But that is extremely valuable in their situation and does tell us potentially, and not even potentially, does tell us that they are thinking about their finances, right? Which they have to do anyway, but they're thinking hard about their finances. And so I wondered when they made the trade, now we know the answer to this, if this could go two ways. If you remember in the past, the Pacers did this in 2021. They used an early second rounder and a younger player, in that case, Aaron Holiday, to move up from the early second round to the late first round. That's how they got Isaiah Jackson. I wondered if they would do that, but they did not. Now they have pick 38. Last year they had pick 36. They moved up one slot to 35 to get Johnny Furphy. Lo and behold, they get a cheap contributor on a guy who was projected in a lot of places as a first rounder, right? That is now on the table for them. If they view someone who's still available as a first round guy, and that's not unreasonable, after 30 picks and maybe one or two, the people viewed a stretch as not an insane, maybe one pick was first round draft night. They could, use more cash, use pick 54, whatever, to get that guy, right? So I think that's shrewd business right now. You never know. The 2030 Kings pick could be good, but pick 38 is pretty high. Like, it's hard to model out how good the Sacramento Kings will be 5 seasons from now. I think you can use franchise history a little bit as your guide, but the odds that they'll be one of the worst 8 teams is probably less likely than the other band, which is 22 teams. So from a value perspective, cash, a wash and trades to any observer, fan, whatever, I think it's good business just on that. And the Spurs, who had 2 lottery picks, don't have the roster spots for the 38th pick in theory. So it makes sense for them to kick the can down the road, bet against the Kings, whatever. It's a win-win trade. And I think it makes a ton of sense for the Pacers because of their financial reality. And so I would now expect, especially because the other thing I talked about of moving up from the early second round to the late first round didn't happen, I would expect that they will try to pick, at 38 or between 31 and 38, whatever you want to say, and try to do exactly what they did with Furphy, right? A cheaper contract, maybe even a lower first-year value than Furphy, but more, guaranteed money, whatever they want to do. Furphy's contract, like I already said, was 4 years, $8.6 million. The first 3 years guaranteed, and then a team option on the 4th year. The first-year value was $1.85 million. The veterans minimum next year is $2.2 million, right? If they get a first-year value on the guy they pick 38, which is 3 spots after 35, at like $1.8 million, $1.7 million even, but more guaranteed money maybe on the back, that could be a good way for them to save a little bit of money. And you might be thinking, who cares about that tiny amount of savings? They should want veterans. They should want to be good. Like, yeah, that's true in theory, but that any amount's going to help. Like I talked about the tax bands yesterday and how they're like $5.5 million apart. Like all this stuff could help. It opens up flexibility throughout the season. And if this already made sense to me with the 54th pick, this makes even more sense now to me with the 38th pick. So I think this was a smart trade by the Pacers. And I now expect that tomorrow we will be discussing whoever they picked at 31 through 38 or 31 through 40 if they move back a little bit and pick up something in the future, whatever. And that player I would expect will be a standard rostered player next year, a guy to watch in Summer League and actually keep an eye on. Much more interesting than someone picked 54. So that's the trade they made and why I think they did it. The other part of this is people saw phrasing that I want to talk about. So if you trade, so Bobby Marks correctly, by the way, tweeted that the Pacers triggered second apron restrictions by doing this trade because they sent cash in this trade. I don't want to get too into the weeds here because it's a little boring for a podcast, but triggering second apron restrictions does not mean a team is in the second apron, right? The Pacers' salary is still their team salary, but teams, if you're in the second apron, like if your spending is as much as the Suns or the Celtics or whatever, you are not allowed to send out cash in trades, right? You can't do it. It's one of the restrictions. So what the league's rule is if you are a team that's below the second apron, but then you do send out cash in trades, you cannot then in the future go into the second apron because that would be an advantage. So then the Pacers next season are now hard capped at the second apron's level, which is very high. It's $207 million. If they sign Turner to a reasonable deal and then bring back some minimum backup centers and a veteran point guard, and the 38th pick at a number that about I estimated earlier, they'd still be like $6 million shy of the second apron. It's not even something they have to think about. In theory, it lowers the chance that they use their mid-level, and it really reduces the chance that they'd use any or all of a disabled player exception for Tyrese Haliburton. But if you listen to yesterday's podcast, I already explained to you that I don't think they would have used those resources anyway, given their current level of spending. So it does very little to me to change what their off-season outlook is and their resource outlook and their free agency outlook. And it does give them a chance to get the 38th pick in the draft. I think that's good stuff. Let's talk about what they could do now tomorrow. Who could they pick? What should they be looking at, if anything, in terms of players, as we continue looking at the Pacers draft here on Locked On Pacers. Before we get into any of that, we need to talk about WayFair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, WayFair has made it so easy to turn that into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. And WayFair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. I just got new ones. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. So many things you could want to redesign. You could pick up, like me, new cushions for your Adirondack chairs, or new outdoor dining, or modern lounge chairs. Whatever your style is, they've got it. They can deliver it to you free and fast and hassle-free, even with their bigger items. So now when you're hosting friends or unwinding with a book, it feels like your own private retreat. So don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with WayFair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making me your first listen today and every single day, or second listen. Locked On Hawks, what a crazy draft day for the Hawks. I think they would be my biggest winner team in terms of getting a player that I think is pretty decent and picking up a great asset for next year. That's a heck of a trade they made with the Pelicans. The Pelicans used the pick they got from the Pacers in that trade, actually. So interesting stuff. In terms of the team that actually drafted the most interesting, the Nets drafted 5 players. Locked On Nets with a new host, Eric Slater. Good place for your second listen. Okay, Pacers, they're on the clock at 38. They're on the clock at 54. A starting question for the draft usually, and if I had more time to talk about the draft this offseason, I would have, is usually, what does the team need? Is there anything they actually need? Is there a position they should look at, right? And so right this second, you're listening to this, you're watching me, whatever your mode of consuming Locked On Pacers is, the Pacers have a gaping, technically, no, let me get through this. I'm not suggesting any positions yet. They have a gaping hole at center. Myles Turner's about to be a free agent. Isaiah Jackson's about to be a free agent. Tony Bradley is almost certainly going to be a free agent. And Thomas Bryant is going to be a free agent. They right this second have no centers. I suspect that one or more of those guys will be brought back. I also suspect the Pacers would not want anyone picked 38th overall to play next year, like rotation minutes or meaningful minutes. So I don't think they have a need at the 5. And I'll talk more about their full rotation in a second. After Tyrese Haliburton went down, you could say maybe they need a point guard. They still have Andrew Nembhard. They still have TJ McConnell. And on a 2-way, they still have Ray J. Dennis, who signed a 2-year 2-way with the Pacers in January when he signed his contract, right? So they have like reasonable guys everywhere. And then like a Mathurin, Shepard, Nesmith, Walker, Furphy wing rotation. And, some of those guys can play the 4, like Walker, maybe Furphy, and then Siakam and Toppin. Like they have most positions covered pretty well. Maybe they need another point guard. We'll see what happens at center. I suspect they'll have no problem getting 2 guys that they like, potentially 2 that were already on their team last year. So operating on the assumption that I am with the center position, they don't have a position that they're like, they need that. They need to build through their pipeline there. Now you could, if they draft a center, I would understand it. Because if they lose Bradley and Bryant or both or neither or Jackson too, like, yeah, they might need depth there. If they drafted a point guard, I would understand it as like hey, you only have Nembhard and McConnell potentially on your team next year. But like, think about this as the team. Just making this up, right? So to put Tyrese Haliburton to the side, but that's player number 1. Then a starting 5 of, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, Turner, and either Mathurin or Shepard, assuming Turner resigns. And then a bench of McConnell and the other one of Mathurin or Shepard, Walker, Toppin, and for this exercise, pretend with me, Isaiah Jackson, right? With Haliburton, that's 11 players already. Furphy gets you to 12. If one or Bradley or Bryant is back, that's 13. So there's already like no roster spots and no positional needs. So that's a very long lead up to say there's not really a position I think that they should be like, that is what they want. And when you're picking at 38, I think best player available is typically the way to go anyway. And the Pacers have kind of spread out their youth pretty well in terms of the positions most of it is at. Their most immediate youth, guys on rookie deals, Mathurin, Shepherd, Walker, Furphy, are more concentrated on the wings. So maybe point guard or center could be something they look at in that under that lens. But I'm saying a lot to say I don't necessarily personally think that they need to get someone at a certain position. However, best player available is very interesting. A lot of mock drafts, I only come through a couple for what I'm about to say, but a lot of mock drafts, like the top 20 to 25 guys, all got picked on day one, right? Furphy was mocked last year. Him and Filipowski were the two guys that were like in every first round mock that didn't get picked, right? They were in the green room. There were no green room guys who didn't get picked today, I believe. If I'm wrong on that, let me know. But I think the guys that I've seen in the most first round mocks that did not get picked this time are Rasheer Fleming from St. Joseph's. And I apologize if I say these guys' names wrong. Again, I have done no draft prep at all this year. I have like general feeling on some of the lottery pick guys because I do, but I don't really have any feeling beyond the top 14. I will obviously heavily research whoever the Pacers pick. And then Maxime Reynaud from, I might have said that wrong too, whatever, from Stanford. Those are the two guys that I think a lot of mocks had in the top 30 that did not get picked. That's a center from Stanford, point getter. And then Fleming from St. Joseph's, a lot of people that I like to talk to about the draft seem to really like him. Outside of that, a couple places had like Noah Penda. He's a center from overseas as a guy that was in a lot of first round mocks. And then a couple more that snuck in one here or there. Cam Jones from Marquette. I'm not even going to get this one right. Adu Thiero from Arkansas. Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton. Johnny Broom from Auburn. Kobe Brea from Kentucky. And then those are the guys that I think were like one time I saw them in the first round or like high enough in the 30s that I thought, I'll bring them up here. And then a lot of the guys, Drake Powell got picked by Brooklyn. Like he's mocked. I'm looking at Tankathon's mock draft, which is them just aggregating from other places. Drake Powell's at 31 right here, right? He already got picked. That guy, that shock pick to the Blazers, that guy's at 42, right? It's not like so crazy what's happened so far. I bring all this up to say it's like last year. There's like two guys who are in that level of range, and there's not a specific thing the Pacers need. And so to me, the things to watch for are, do they try to move up or down? Because that would suggest there's somebody they really like, whether that's from their value or their skill. Last year with Furphy, I think everybody kind of realized, it could be good if they got a wing, have this guy fill in, first round grade. He's still there. They moved up one spot to get him. Either the Spurs were going to pick him or someone was going to trade with the Spurs to pick him. So the Pacers went and got him. If that happens again, like if this Fleming kid is somebody that is as good as some of the draft people I follow say, or some of these mock drafts say, maybe they try to get him. He's a 4. He's, maybe a little older, it looks like, but who cares? If he's good, he's good. I don't know any of this stuff on these players, right? A lot of the guys that I mentioned are older, actually. A very thematic draft. I will say this. I know a little bit about Kobe Brea. I think he could be one of the best shooters in the draft. You can do worse than drafting shooting. If they pick him, I'd be like, great, I actually understand who he is a little bit. But I keep rambling and naming names and looking at all this to say, I don't necessarily think that I have a strong opinion on who they should pick or what type of player they should be picking. I've seen a lot of fans mention the other Nembhard. I have no idea how good he is, right? He plays a lot like his brother in terms of how it looks like they have similar mechanics and movement. I don't know how good he actually is or what kind of prospect he could be. It'd be cool for me as someone who chronicles stories to have both of them on the same team. But, a lot of mocks I've looked at have him in the lower. I'm not saying this is where I would have him because I haven't watched him play, but have him in like the 40s to 50s, maybe at 54 if he's still there. That would be a great story. But I'm rambling. What should you watch for the draft is, do the Pacers actually move up? Because that would suggest they actually quite like the player they're picking, like last year with Furphy. And if they do pick a center, what does that actually signal about their offseason, right? Any other position is very set in stone. Like I already went through the rotation. Again, my operating assumption is that Myles Turner is going to be back, and I will explain why once again in the third segment here. Maybe they keep Jackson, maybe they keep Bradley or Bryant. I don't think they'd keep both. Regardless, if they pick a center, the chance they keep any of those backups would go down, right? Probably significantly in some cases. So that's one thing here. The other part of this is I think that their financial reality and the fact that they're willing to trade up for this pick to add them potentially to a standard roster spot does not suggest to me that James Johnson's going to be somebody who they have room for on the team next year. We'll see, but their financial reality might make that tough to do. It might be premature on that. We'll see after the draft, but that could be something to keep an eye on as well. So if they pick a center, that's more noteworthy than any other position, even though I don't necessarily think they'd be playing in year one. But keep an eye on any movement up. At 54, keep an eye on two-way contracts. Enrique Freeman and Quentin Jackson are both free agents. They are both two-way eligible still next year, so they could be back, obviously. But just these are the things to keep an eye on with the draft. Let's talk about Myles Turner and his free agency a little bit more to close out today's show, because I forgot to tell you something very important about his free agency, and specifically something Rick Carlisle said about it. Before we talk about that, let's talk about Skims. When I found out Skims is making underwear for men, I'm intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try, and it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear between fit and comfort and finding the right style. It can be challenging, but Skims changes all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classical briefs. It's all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Whatever you're looking at, they can get it for you. The cotton brief, if you're, TMI for me, I'm a briefs guy through and through. Finding the perfect yet classic brief can be challenging, but luckily for me and everyone, Skims comes through with their cotton brief. It's the classic. It's everything you love about that feel and of a cotton brief, but with the maxed out comfort and breathability only Skims can do. If you're a briefs guy, can't beat it. Shop SKIMS Mens at skims.com. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop down menu that follows. That's skims.com. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making me your first listen today, and every single day make your second listen other teams I'm intrigued by for their draft night for one reason or another. The Suns, who got two centers and traded for Mark Williams. We'll see how that physical goes, of course. I found that to be fascinating. And they drafted Malo Watch, the center show for the Phoenix Suns. That one is certainly worth diving into. Okay, let's close this up talking more about Myles Turner. I talked about his free agency stuff yesterday on the offseason preview. I still think all the same things. And I forgot to mention this. I had the tab open to say it. It was on the top of my screen the whole time I was recording, and I just forgot. Rick Carlisle does an every Tuesday radio segment locally here with 107.5 The Fan, the broadcast partner for the team. 8 a.m. He's talking with the morning show guys, James Boyd, Kevin Bowen, and Jeff. And he was asked about Myles Turner and his free agency. And he said, quote, "I don't think it's any secret that the franchise at this particular moment, that is the number one priority." Rick Carlisle said of Myles Turner free agency. The number one priority is if you needed any more signals that I would expect the deal to get done between the two parties, the Pacers are calling it the number one priority. Remember what they said about Siakam last year? It was basically that exact same verbiage, right? He is the priority, number one priority, whatever. Carlisle continued, "I don't know anything about money or numbers or years or any of that kind of stuff, but Myles is a very important part of what we've done here, what we've been doing. He's a very important part of the history of the franchise, certainly over the last decade. I know that will be a big topic. I'm not privy to every little conversation going on there, but Myles is a very important part of what we're doing. That will be a big thing." It's hard to, so one, like if you say, you get a lot of egg on your face, right? And that's why a lot of times you don't get these kind of quotes from executives and coaches, which is why, again, this signals to me that even beyond the 10,000 reasons I already expected Turner Pacers reunion to happen, again, this also more strongly makes me think that it's going to happen. And again, it's similar language to what we heard last year. And of course, he's the number one priority. He is their best player who's entering free agency. All the rest were hurt or didn't play much, or are not replaceable is such a harsh word, but more replaceable in terms of what the open market provides. Of course, hearing this from Carlisle means a lot, right? So that is the thing I skipped yesterday, is that the team views it as that important. And again, almost certainly, we did not see Detroit cut any money at the draft. The Nets made their 5 picks. That's filling up their salary after they brought in Terrence Mann in a trade the day before. The cap space options are just not there, right? So Turner's best chance to get paid is the same place that has a big need for someone like Myles Turner. It seems like the perfect marriage is Turner returning to the Pacers. And that's beyond their own relationship, beyond Turner's conversations the last few years about how he feels so attached to the city and feels like he's grown up here, and beyond that the Pacers would like to have a good center on their team when Tyrese Haliburton does return from injury, and they don't have a means to replace him with any other. They won't have 25 to 30 to 35 whatever million to spend on a different equal quality center. I don't need to keep doing this. I think most people understand the reasons, and everybody who's saying they shouldn't bring him back just doesn't think he's as good as he actually is, and that's fine. That's obviously my own opinion. No one offers a replacement plan. They say, let him walk. Okay, then what? So anyway, I think that Carlisle's commentary provided more insight into the Pacers' thinking and continues to suggest that Turner will be back. The first-year salary is the most critical part of that. I talked about this a little yesterday, but I'll rope it in here again today for people who maybe didn't listen. The first year's, so the Pacers have in the past with several guys have been a love flat contracts team, right? Aaron Nesmith is currently on a contract that is flat salaries every year, right? When they can, they like to do that. It does make good sense. It's easy for planning. If you can afford to pay the guy more at the beginning, go for it. Doug McDermott was on a flat contract with them in the past. They've had other guys who fall into this category. I'm clicking back through past years of cap geekery, right? So people have suggested, I talked with Yossi Goslin on his show about this stuff. Myles was at 18 2 years in a row before he renegotiated and extended. That was flat. He talked about maybe it being flat. I think a critical part to watch with Turner is the Pacers getting that first year value as low as possible, right? And that's why, again, the years will matter too, because a lot of players are willing to trade lower annual values for more guaranteed money in terms of years or options or things like that. Like, is there like a partially guaranteed player option fourth year that could make that first year salary even lower? Is it, 5 years seems a little much given the length of Haliburton and Siakam's contracts, but also if you're Turner, you'd like to be extension eligible at some point. So 2 years seems too short. So something in the 3, 4, 5 range, even though 5 seems too long to me, would make the most sense. How do they get the first year value at a tenable number for the Pacers, but also at a market value for Myles Turner? And people keep talking about the finals, which he did not play well in the finals. Like, they played 100 other games last season. He was quite good at many of them. Anyway, I digress. Rick Carlisle's words mean more than mine. If he's calling it a priority, similar to how he was phrasing conversations about Siakam last year, I tend to believe that. And the Pacers should want Myles Turner to be their priority this summer. We will see how it goes. My operating assumption for basically every podcast going forward is that they will do everything they can to keep him, and he would like to be back. Okay, draft time. So tonight, the Pacers will pick a player, perhaps 2, perhaps 3, perhaps 2 is the most likely because they currently have 2 picks. And tomorrow we'll break that all down. So who'd they pick? What does it mean for the team? How does it break into place? Then over the weekend, we'll do 2 shows. 1, what does it mean for free agency, if anything? And 2, I'll try to get people who have covered their guys or those guys in the past to talk kind of briefly about what they can bring to the Pacers and what it means. And perhaps we'll get to hear from the front office this week. And if so, that is also stuff to talk about. So once moves are made, it's the time. There's lots to go. And then next week, previewing free agency and a little more deep divey on lots of the Pacers' key decisions. So lots coming here on Locked On Pacers. They'll have new members of their team tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for listening today. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East. This podcast has an Instagram account at Locked On Pacers and a Twitter account under the same handle. Thank you all so much for listening. Back tomorrow talking about who the Pacers drafted and any other moves they may have made. Thank you all so much for listening. See ya very soon.